We touched on it earlier. Charles's comments created a lot of buzz over the last few days. A conversation about Donald Trump, who has said his criminal indictments and mugshot have endeared him to black voters. It's been everywhere, even creating topics for some of our fellow news networks. So we talked about President Biden's enthusiasm problem among black Americans. But the flip side of that coin is this: the appeal of Donald Trump to certain black voters. So let's talk about that with Coleman Hughes. He has joined us on stage. He's a podcast host and CNN political analyst whose new book, The End of Race Politics: Arguments for a Colorblind America, is available now. I'm always fascinated by the term colorblind. I always wonder, Coleman, is that possible? Also joining us is CNN senior political commentator Van Jones is here. Great to have you guys here.
Awesome.
Coleman, let's start with you. What do you make of the president's comments? I hear you see things a little differently.
Well, yeah, I don't think they're offensive. I'm not going to punch anyone in the face, but that doesn't mean they're right either. So if you look at it, Donald Trump's been gaining steam amongst black voters since prior to 2020. The polls from 2022, before the first indictment, actually showed him picking up a lot of steam too. Mm-hmm. So whatever the trend is, it's probably not the indictments. It's probably a dissatisfaction with Democrats in general. You also look at him polling against other Republicans.
But he named the
also
indictments
polling well
specifically,
with black.
though.
Right, so
he named the indictments.
He named them. So I don't think he's right about that, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think the indictment is what is drawing black voters towards him.
What do you
it's clearly
think it
something
is?
else.
What do you think it is?
Well, I think, frankly, it could just be that, first of all, this trend is a lot of younger black voters. Basically, it's black men under 30 that are moving towards the Republican Party, black men basically my age. And it could just be a general dissatisfaction with the message that the Democratic Party is telling black people. They're telling black people essentially, nothing is your fault, it's all systemic racism, and that's actually not appealing to a lot of younger men. Younger men prefer to be told your life is in your own control, and you can make your own destiny.
Why don't you think it's offensive? I think that's interesting. You said, I don't think it's offensive.
He said it was wrong. So
I think it's incorrect.
He did say it was wrong.
But it doesn't offend me as an idea.
Yeah.
The idea in theory that people would rally behind Trump because he's being unfairly persecuted, and that resonates with black people's feeling of being unfairly persecuted, that's not offensive to me in theory. I just don't think it's the actual reason why people are going towards him. It has nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm. I was offended. I appreciate your point. I was offended.
I was offended too.
But maybe it's a generational thing. I agree with what you're saying, that he does kind of have this kind of outlaw image that's going on now, and that might be somewhat appealing. But I think in his mind, he associates black people with criminality. Mm-hmm. So I think in his mind, what he did with the Central Park Five and that sort of stuff. So to me, it was a tell. Just the same way that he said the new Republican contender for one of the governorships is Dr. King times 10. Mm-hmm. This guy's not a civil rights guy at all, but he's black. And so you can see in his mind, crime, Dr. King, crime, Dr. King, black. So I was offended by that. But I think you put your finger on something very important. I do think that Trump seems strong right now. You got people jumping on him, 957 lawsuits, all these felonies and stuff. If I had one felony, I'd be home crying. Yeah. This dude has
or you'd be in jail, Van.
Oh, true. I'd be in jail, crying.
Or you'd be in jail. But that only seems to boost his popularity.
And I just do think that right now, people are hurting and uncertain. You go in the grocery store, you spend $300, and the food runs out by Wednesday. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel good. Yeah. The world seems to be on fire. And then here's this guy who's just strong. Now, he's strong and wrong, but he does seem strong. And I think that does have some appeal. And I think that we got to deal with that. I also do think.
But he's also very fluid with the truth, and that doesn't seem to matter to people either.
You are a well-raised sister. She's fluid with the truth. She didn't say you're a damn liar.
But you know what I mean. And yes. That doesn't bother you, Coleman?
Oh, his lying definitely bothers me. I didn't vote for him, and I wouldn't vote for him. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of voters, I agree, view him as strong. And there's actually been some polls of Republicans that like him. And a lot of them agree with all of the same criticisms that you just said. They know he's a liar, but they like that he's strong. Mm-hmm. And especially when you put him up against Joe Biden, who with each passing day just looks worse and worse and more feeble, mm-hmm. having that next to a person that is relatively strong
Because, guys, I don't necessarily think it's about age. I think it's about a person's energy and a person's vitality.
That's right.
It's not the number.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's the number.
That's right.
I think it's about how they carry themselves.
That's exactly right.
Bloomberg is, I think, in his 80s. I
Yes.
mean, he is sharp as a tack.
Yes,
Bernie
he is.
Sanders. So I do think that the way that Biden carries himself, his stutter, which I worked for him in the Obama White House. He always had that stutter, but it does seem a lot worse. And so I do think that, hurts. And then also on policy. We're all friends here. We can talk. There were things that black voters wanted and expected and hoped for in 2020. Police reform, the George Floyd Policing Act, but it didn't pass. Voting rights, the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill, that didn't pass. More progress on criminal justice, the Equal Act, that didn't pass. And so once you get past the emotionality and this, that, and the other, you just kind of look to Charles' point, what did we get for our vote? Look, the economy is better than it could have been. I love a lot of stuff he did, but if you just look at that particular set of issues, you could be disappointed.
Yeah,
On the other hand, though,
let me ask a quick question, because this is, go back to something you said. The reason, and obviously I'm only speaking for myself. The reason I think the Democratic Party and Mr. Biden, President Biden, is losing black votes is they only care about black people every 4 years. They come into our neighborhoods and say, we're gonna make stuff better. We're gonna do this, do this, do this. And then finally, us black people are like, man, other than my ability to dunk a basketball, all my neighborhoods are still the same. Our schools are still the same. And that's why I think black people are leaving disappointed in the Democratic Party, because I ain't gonna lie, I voted Democratic every time just because I thought it was gonna help black people and poor people. Because black people and poor white people, they're in the same boat. And I didn't care who the president was, I'm not gonna lie, but I only voted Republican one time in my life, and that was for John Kasich, and I didn't even know he couldn't win. But then I'm starting to look like, man, I understand why black people are leaving, want to vote for somebody else, because every 4 years they come into our neighborhoods and say, man, we're gonna make things better for you.
Well, I think that's true, and I'll let you go. I do want to point out, though, that poor black folks have been voting for Democrats for 2 generations, not as much progress as you want. Poor white folks have been voting for Republicans in Appalachia and other places for 3 generations or 4, and not that much progress. So there's a poor people problem with both parties. But
I think what you highlighted might be a reason why some black voters stay home. But if we're asking why are certain black voters switching from Democrat to Republican, I don't think they're switching to Trump or to other Republicans because they think those Republicans are going to actually make change. I think those voters are switching for other reasons, just because they actually don't like the message that Democrats are sending to them as black people, and especially as young black people. Because again, this trend is not happening throughout black America. It's confined basically to black men under 30.
okay, I have a. You're concerned about.
How old are you, Coleman? Do you
28.
28.
And we're proud of you, by the way. I mean, this brother, for a 28-year-old, I mean, so you're making us proud.
Thank you, Van.
I think you're onto something, and at the same time, I question this. This is also the generation that's mostly on social media, and often is only getting their news now through TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that there are some concerted efforts, maybe even not from the United States efforts, to push this distress and this depression and this. I don't think it's just Democrats run a victim narrative. I think you're saying Democrats run a victim narrative, people don't like that. That's never been that appealing. But I think there's something happening on social media where I'm seeing over and over again messages basically saying don't vote, saying why should we vote, acting as if nothing has been achieved. I would say at least this. Maybe you can't get what you want by voting, but you can sure lose what you got by not voting.
Yeah.
And so you at least need to vote defensively. And that seems to be being pushed back on. So I think that some of it might be not liking the message, but some of it might be some actual online influence operations. Are you concerned at all that some of the stuff is artificial?
It certainly could be happening. I mean, I know that for a fact when they looked into the years between, say, 2014 and 2020, they saw that there were actual Facebook pages created by Russia, but those pages, well, they were playing both sides of the equation.
Yeah,
they were inflaming Trump supporters, but they were also planning BLM rallies, right? They were inflaming both sides to try to destroy the country.
But that is the Russian propaganda model, where you create polarization and then you get people so frustrated that people just kind of give up and go to the couch. And so I'm just saying there is something happening with black men. Some of it is the pain of going to all these funerals and seeing, young men after young man put in the ground and nothing happening. Some of it is this victim narrative that is coming forward that just says, it's almost like it's disempowering. If you're black, you can't do anything. It's just systemic racism, nothing you can do. I think that is a turnoff. But there is something happening on social media that we need to look at, because I've never seen this much despair from a group of people who usually are the spark plugs for hope in our community.
Now, I will argue, though, that...
And how do you just blame it on social media?
I don't know. I'm just saying I want to have a real conversation, because I don't feel like all of
why is it happening?
Yeah.
almost all of the major trends of the past 10 years trace in some way to social media. We're talking about skyrocketing depression rates among youth. All of this stuff is caused by social media. But from the data I've seen, the people that use social media the most are very liberal young people. They're the highest, most active users. So is it that I'm not sure they're the ones that are being pushed to the right per se, but certainly there's a major trend going on with social media. It's affecting every aspect of our lives.